I am of the pure mind of God. I am the resurrection and the life in my body, my finances, my relationships, and my world. I qualify everything in my world with perfection. I am perfection. I am this perfect day, and the life that lives in me is the light that cannot fail. I accept only God's perfection, His good, in my outer circumstances. I know in my heart that God is all in all. I am absolutely not concerned about what happens, because I know wonderful things are happening now. Happy Freedom Day. So we are back on the hot and sweaty, heading off the boardwalk, going over the bridge, and just getting some fresh air. I did go out yesterday and do some recording. I had to make a video for the new book that I'm gonna get out with the video training that's established with it. So another hot one though. I was drenched. So humid. But anyway, what I want to talk about is the traditions of men. Isn't that what we are celebrating? The traditions of men? Oh no, we're celebrating our freedoms. Oh, that's right. So the freedoms have all but eroded, but the traditions are as strong as ever. And so it brings up this interesting outlook on life that I have. If your habits are no longer producing the desired result, then maybe change your habits. But see, the human collective will never get rid of the traditions of men. And it's these traditions of men that are the very enslavement that keep them locked into servitude. Because they are nothing more than serfs at the end of the day. You know, you didn't get your freedom on July 4th. You've had your freedom the whole time as a spiritual reflection of God. You don't need to celebrate once a year on a day in memorial of something that never took place. The Declaration of Independence did not give you your freedom. In fact, when you went under the birth certificate, you became totally enslaved as a corporation. So the only way out, if anybody had a thinking mind, which very few people do, would be to dissolve all corporations and liquidate the assets, because there's no other way out of the tyrannical insanity that the world has become. Because all of the nefarious actors can hide behind the shells of their corporations with zero liability. And so there's the answer. Nobody will do anything about it, so don't worry. Because the traditions of men will carry on as strong as ever. And you see, that's the matrix of dreaming. And that is the artificial construct. It is a simulation of the human five senses run by the sorcery and the pagan religions and the institutions of men that have projected external governance outside of themselves since Yahweh, which is the name for Satan in the Bible. Yahweh is the name for Satan. So in Genesis, we have Genesis 1 and Genesis 2.
and we have the Elohim created all, and all his works were complete. And then we have Yahweh, and then we have man looking outside of man after he ate of the tree. Okay, once you eat the knowledge of good and evil, you look outside of yourself for governance. And anything that comes outside of yourself for governance is going to come to bind you and to shackle you. I don't have 35 pages of content that I want to read to you about this, but I'm sure you'll find that in the new book if you care about that. But what I really want to do is get down to the conceptual basis of these traditions of men being flawed from the beginning and faulty. They're defunct. We celebrate Christmas. That's not the birth of Christ. We celebrate Easter. We celebrate Halloween, totally pagan. We celebrate Thanksgiving. We celebrate all of these things. And none of it actually has any relevance to any truth. And it's not supposed to. Because the way that the human mind is created out of Babylonian fiction language, is that anytime the truth is presented in plain sight, the mind will believe the lie. And that's why these over-the-top claims that are being pulled over the wool being pulled over the eyes of all the sheep are happening, and they're escalating, and they're so atrocious and so unbelievable, is because they have to be. Because that's the only way that the sheep would believe it. They're idiots, okay? They're complete morons. And the reason I have to bring it in such a harsh way of saying it is that even Christ said this in the Gnostic Gospels, that even the wisest of amongst them were empty-headed. Nothing has changed, and it's not going to change. The whole simulation is designed as a school. It's designed for those who have sinned, for those who have turned away from one mind, one idea, one activity, one presence, one God in their personal thought, and looked to a belief in duality in two powers, God and evil, good and evil. God and good are synonymous. Intelligence, truth, life, abundance, all of these things you can be synonymous with God, source, beingness. And the ultimate way that I like to look at it is its pure awareness in its most restful position, because its works were already completed. Pure awareness is the mind of Christ. And truth is that direct connection. When we make connection to one mind in our personal thought, and then we come into the pure awareness of complete rest with zero position for or against anything, we just witness it as nothing but transitory, fleeting phenomenon. But yet we're at rest in the truth, resting in peace, dead to the world and alive in spirit. They put it in plain sight. The tombstone, R.I.P., you have to rest in peace. You have to be dead to the world to be alive in spirit. You have to lay down your life to gain your life. Your life in mortality is a belief. You have to lay it down in order to gain your spiritual abode as the reflection in the image and likeness of the Father, parent mind, source, beingness, goodness. And so all of this vast knowledge that I say all these morons have picked up, because they become morons, because they pick up all this vast knowledge. What is that vast knowledge? Traditions of men. It's the obstruction itself. It is the construct of binding that takes place in the subjective reasoning mind. I never fell into this trap. I never got it. I never understood any of it. Everything from the Stars and Stripes, which is a war flag, by the way, to the celebrating of Christmas as anything more than a commercial holiday. You know, I used to love sitting around waiting for toys to be distributed, but I always felt this unease when I'd go to church and I'd say, okay, this is really interesting, so this is what it's all about, huh? Didn't make much sense, given one day of the entire year, that this is what it's all about, but we're going to give it one day of the entire year. That's what the traditions of man are. They are the artificial substitute that provides a temporary sense of relief in the collective insanity. So you can back that up and listen to what I said again. See, the mind of insanity is the collective human condition, the reasoning mind. And it always falls from grace by the who, what, when, where, why, and how, 6 degrees of separation, out of its place of rest from pure awareness into identifying as material, flesh and bone, in a world of duality, always pushing against something or trying to reinforce the very thing by choosing the alternative side. Yes, that's what all the truthers are. They're just reinforcing the very evil by choosing the alternative side, which is the same coin, just on the flip side of it. So pure awareness would be the edge of the coin, seeing that there are these dielectric forces that emanate from the still point, the 0 point. The dielectric comes, it's the rockets of desire coming from contrast within the human condition. It's the dramatization of human persona. It's the will of man. It's the will of man. The will of man has made concrete the traditions of men. And because these traditions of men hold this thing in place, it holds people in their prism of logic. And it chastises those who do not conform. The weak and the ignorant always conform. And what makes a person weak? Lack of knowledge of the Father. Because the only strength is the joy that comes from direct knowledge of the Father. Man has no strength. Man is a dead carcass. The only true man is one man. There's only one man. God only had one son. Hello, McFly. God only had one son. And then all the human mortals in their pagan religions, they see this white guy with a beard and they say, oh, it's the Son of God, it's Jesus. And they hold on to this white guy with a beard and they say, this is it. Well, it sure does help the British Empire stay in power because they carry on those attributes in their physical. And doesn't it always just fall back to the British Empire? The Queen and the crown. It just always seems to go back to that. But that's the Matrix. And for all you Trumpers out there, you know, he's part of the same system. So I wrote about that in my book. No mortal is coming to save you. None. None whatsoever. None. The entire outer is an empty carcass. It's deficient from its root. It's ignorance of the human five senses. It's a void. What it is its centrifugal loss of power and inertia into the distortion. The distortion of the facts becomes the logic of the day in human reasoning. It becomes the traditions of men. That's how you know you're far from home as the prodigal son. When you are governed. When you are governed, which means you are serving that false master. To serve means to be governed by. So again, there was only one man. That's the living Christ. That's human imagination. There's only one substance and one manifest. Man means manifest, not flesh and bone guy with a beard. See, they even substituted the word man for flesh and bone man. None of it's real. None of it is. You live in the mind of God as an idea, a principle, as an emanation of the one man, the living substance of the human. Human means the coloring of the law. See, human is the coloring of the man. See, they modified it. Therefore, they changed it, which means it no longer is the fact. Isn't that interesting? There are no humans. There are no mortals. That is a dream of your five senses. Every mystic, every sage, every seer, every one who has pierced through the other side understands that life is contained in spirit and never matter. Man lives in his idea. Man is an instrument, a medium for truth or ignorance. The traditions of man are pure ignorance, and they govern mortals. Hello. So as the mortals are being governed by the father of lies, and they are marching in the parade of the dead, because they are identifying as corpses in a corporeal meat suit with a corporate fiction ID in a maritime sea of law, they are Egyptians, sorcery. All of these terms are describing the condition of state of man who has fallen asleep in the five senses, reasoning at every turn based on faulty reports. You cannot get there from there. You can't take faulty data and get to a truth. You have to begin with truth, and you have to hold firm to a truth so you can burn away the haystack of lies so that only truth is remaining. That's retroductive reasoning. That's what has been swept off the table about a century ago. Now we live in a modern day idiocracy where people are so dumbed down. But see, that's the benefit. That's the benefit. That's actually one step closer to the truth. Because the further away you go from the 0 point, the closer you get back to the reset, which means to the end where destruction destroys itself. Ignorance always destroys itself. And we're getting so close. We're getting so close. So as we get ready to come into our place of rest, eternal rest within the one mind, one spirit, one presence, one activity, the one living cause of all phenomenon is the human living imagination. You say, oh, well, wait a minute. If that's true, if there's only one living cause of all phenomenon in my natural or my outer realms, including this physical body and this extended physical body, which appears to be my world, then how did it get so evil? And I will tell you why. Because of blasphemy. It is the only spiritual crime that is not forgivable. This is according to the Nag Hammadi Library of the Gospels, I believe, of Philip or something in that library. I remember reading this, and it all came together for me, because when you take another god, which means another power, and its graven image, all of these Hollywood druid mesmeric movies, this sorcery that comes at you, this false narrative, and you put these images of war, lust, deceitfulness, ignorance into the living imagination, you bring a sacrifice that is unworthy before the altar of the one mind, one power, one presence, one activity, one life, and it gets destroyed by the means of the reformation or the reformation of the sinner. You see, a sinner is formed in the image and likeness of this world, identifying with the ideas of this world. I said identifying with the ideas of this world. And he dreams in his thought space and brings the graven images into his now space in the living imagination before the Christ. And the true man is never afflicted, but the counterfeit, the mortal, is always reformed for the act of the sin. That's why it is the unforgivable sin, because it always brings reformation. It always brings the chastening that is divine love in order to purify what God knows to be true in the mind of man. God's pure mind is the only mind, and any other mind gets destroyed. So if you identify as an avatar in the other mind, in that matrix, and you are looking upon evil, contemplating evil, pushing against it by declaring that you are of the other team, instead of releasing all of it together, you see, you must be, you must see, and you must feel perfection. That is the atonement. I must be, I must see, and I must feel perfection. That is the atonement of the Christ. It brings you into the place of rest, which is true forgiveness, which means to yield. Forgive means to yield. And to give means before. To yield before the truth. That means I am not of human will. I am of the mind, the will of God. It's quite simple when you look at it that way, isn't it? So last year, we get to go through the simulation of what I would say is the final exam beginning. It's the beginning of the final exam for those who are of the light. And if you're watching this, you are of the light, or you couldn't be here. Because wisdom has called and wisdom has chosen you. If you were of the father of lies, you would be disgusted by this message, because it would mean the very extinction of your very nature. Because it pushes you out of existence. Because there's only one power, one cause, one activity, and one mind. And therefore anything that suggests otherwise gets deleted. So along comes the PTT during this time, the perfect timing technique, or the perfect your timing. And God reveals to me how man has been bound in this simulated AI dream that has captivated the five senses through sorcery, through the false logic, through the construct of the traditions of men. What did you think it meant when Christ, Yahshua, said, "If you do not hate your mother and father, you cannot be my disciple"? What did you think it meant? What is this belief of mother and father but a tradition of men? Yes, you believe you were born from a birth canal to a dock, out of a womb, in a maritime sea of law, given a birth certificate, a fictional identity, a corpse in a corporeal vessel, in a shipping war going through sea lanes, and you're being penalized at every turn by the father of lies because you've been duped from the beginning. Because of the traditions of men, because you won't let go of the lie to claim the truth. Everything around you is an absolute fabrication of what is real. Everything around you is a falsehood that seeks to distract you away from truth. You see, the traditions of man are designed to distract you, to distract you, to distract you. And so what happens every 3 to 4 seconds? A human has a thought. A human takes a thought about every 3 to 4 seconds that is emanating from a tradition of men, which is a falsehood. And so this repeated distraction, 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 distraction binds man in his human reasoning in the middle place. In the Gospel of Truth, in the Nag Hammadi library, God revealed it to me that it says those who are bound in the middle place. The middle place is the purgatory. It is human reasoning. It is of the devil, which means it is of the father of lies. And it binds you to the sorcery of the fictional 5-sense reality, the matrix of dreaming. And so what God revealed to me was that it's all built on a timing construct. Because the essence of it, the root, is to pull man out of flow state, into a sequence, timing sequence of deception. And so all man needs to do, click track, is to put a click track on and root himself back to first principle idea. And therefore it'll burn away the haystack of lies. And it's funny because the most complex of all problems are always the easiest to solve. For instance, nobody can figure out how to solve the world. It's so simple. Dissolve all corporations and hold every member accountable in their personal or in their private capacity. Duh. Oh no, we can't do that. Oh no. Don't worry, it'll never happen. Because the matrix ain't gonna change. It's not about you changing the matrix, it's about you escaping and deleting your avatar. And how are you going to do that? Well, what is your avatar? It's a belief. And it's governed by all of these sequential distractions that are the traditions of men that form you in the image and likeness of this world. And so the sin comes by that very act of you being formed in the image and likeness of this world. And therefore, the consequence under the law is punishment. Punishment to chasten you so that you shall come to know, love, and trust the Father. And you know, that can all end right now. How? Easy. The simplest of all is to know in your heart that God is all in all. Well, isn't that something? And you know what I can do is I can go ahead and disrupt at every few seconds, stop that reasoning process. This is a reminder to pay it no mind at all, because it's all traditions of men, it's all human reasoning. Every single bit of it. God is all. If we could just remember, we wake up from the dream. That's all you have to do, is root your personal thought back to divine principle ideas so you can be of one mind, one accord, and the sin ceases, and therefore the reformation has already taken place, because wisdom will come and reach you in your place of reaching and persisting for wisdom. Now, is it going to happen in 5 seconds? No. But you see, there's a saying that I had years ago. I don't know who wrote it, but it came along when I needed it the most, when I was only able to walk around the block because I was very ill, according to human belief, with Lyme disease, nearly dead. And I kept this saying with me, and I kept looking at it every day while I would go, and my body would hurt. Many times I would have to cry because I would get home and I'd go into somatization, start shaking, fear for my life all over again, go through this whole traumatic episode, nervous system collapse, all this belief, all part and parcel of being born of this world. But I had this little saying, and it said, if you will persist as others have persisted, you will succeed as others have succeeded. You will see the falling away of a fear or a compulsion. It will fall away like an arrow in the midst of flight because you no longer give it the wings to fly. Now, isn't that something? Isn't it nothing but a fear or a compulsion? You see, Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science, who was originally taught by Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, and this is where I began all of my research, was P.P. Quimby, who had healed over, I think, 10,000 people with a conversation, everything from the lame to the addicted to the nearly dead. He would have a conversation with them. And within moments or within a few days or a few weeks, you see, they would be well again and whole and restored, because the conversation itself undid the very foundation of their enslavement to suffering. Fear and the belief are the two pillars that hold all of your suffering in place. Fear is false identification with flesh-bone duality, the other mind. You see, if you knew that you live, move, and have your being in God, in Christ, and that you were a reflection of the imagination of Spirit, you'd get up and be free right now, because you'd have no thought to the contrary. And so the second part is the thought to the contrary. And so the thought to the contrary is where the PTT technique comes in to shine. Because you're being mesmerized or hypnotized in the middle place through the electromagnetic AI simulation that is reaching the data sphere receptor, which is your human capacity to think from a position of mortality. And you're being bound every few seconds with another thought impression that is of a tradition of men, of mortals, and you are being graven in the image that you are putting before the living Spirit. Therefore, it is bringing the consequence of the fulfillment of the law, which is to chasten you and to reform the sinner into the spiritual likeness in the image of the Father, of the pure mind of God. The resurrection and the life that Christ Yahushua talks about. I am the resurrection and the life. See, resurrection, rising out of mortality. Life is all contained in spirit. Spirit, pure awareness, has not a single element of error anywhere in its substance or its body. And that is a root first principle idea. So now I tell the story of my spiritual mentor, Lona, who you can find her video about Christian Science heals scorpion bite on YouTube. And you see, she used this power when she had been bitten by a fatal scorpion bite. According to human reasoning, her head was swelling, Everyone said, listen, you're probably going to die. This is going to get really ugly. You won't be able to breathe. But she did a very interesting thing. She didn't fall into that mesmerism. She said, well, it's poison? Is that all it is? Well, I can handle that. You want to know why? And you see what she did is she took the reins of control of the self I am, which is the one man, the one manifest. There's only one, remember? She identified with the one. There is no living mind of Christ and then Lona. There's only the living mind of Christ and the radiation of that in the individualization of one of its children. That is of the likeness of the parent or of the father. And you see, that likeness is immutable, and there's not a single element of error in there. And she took that idea that she got from Christian Science in page 458, okay, in the book Science and Health, the Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy. She took that idea, that a spiritual idea has not a single element of error, as her medicine. And you got to say, you got to be kidding me, right? One of the most deadliest, most fierce attacks that could have you dead within minutes to hours in a most gruesome and horrifying way. A fatal scorpion bite. And you're telling me that she turned to an idea instead of the best treatment of the day? Well, let me ask you a question. The best treatment of the day was going to do what? Absolutely nothing. Okay. So where did she go? There were two critical elements I discerned from that healing. Number one is that she rooted her personal thought back to the source. Well, I'm an idea in the mind of God, and it doesn't have a single element of error. She didn't identify with the moral. She identified as a child of the Most High. Second thing is she didn't turn to a graven image or a false god. Now, a god is anything that you give the power to do anything of itself to. That could be food, it could be drugs, it could be muscles, it could be anything you ascribe from the traditions of men. See, she obeyed the commandments by having no other gods. She turned to the idea because God created man in his image and likeness, the idea. So she went to the root and she put no graven images and no false gods, and the carrying out of the law set her free. Now, what's important to understand is that in Romans 8, it describes the carrying out of this law. For the law of spirit has set me free from the law of sin and death. The law of spirit. See, this is a law. It is carried out by the immutable capacity and strength of the Most High. And there is no other law that can interfere with it. The law of mortality, of sin and flesh and bone and suffering and scorpion bite and inflammation and you can name 1,000 things, cannot interfere with the omni-action of God radiating the substance of God, the spiritual likeness, as the very life that Lona identified with. Because she didn't move from her position of authority. She wasn't swayed by traditions of men. Oh, they got a white coat on, they're gods. Oh, they know everything I need to submit myself to their will. Oh, yes, it's fatal. Well, I guess I better lay down and die then. She didn't do any of that. Think about it. So what I submit to you is fear is a decision. Fear is not an emotion. Fear is a decision of who you're going to serve, which God you're going to serve. I know it can feel terrifying. I know the body can come at you with the worst of all sensations. But you see, back of that false narrative of sensation is that God's man has a sensationless spiritual body, because God's man is made in the substance of God. As the Father, so is the Son. And there's only one man. Boom, I just destroyed the whole foundation of that whole piece. That's the logic of first principle. So as I'm tapping my fingers, or I'm just going on my leg or something, if you don't want to cause yourself pain in your knuckles, right? So you have to heal that too. You can just see, I'm using this to disrupt the propensity to fall asleep in the 5-cent stream as I sort out from first principle the truth. God is all in all. It's probably the best place to start if you don't have the full conceptual awareness of this. And see, from that position, you begin to think from that position. In other words, I don't start at the problem and say, well, what do I do now? No, I start from the solution. God is all in all. And then I contemplate, what does that mean? Oh, well, that means that my body's of the same substance. What else does that mean? Oh, well, I have the same mind. Oh, that's a good idea. What else does that mean? Well, that my life is contained there. My life is contained there. Wow, there's the heart of the matter. Get my book so you understand what I just did. See, reading my new book, it's a short read. The actual text of the book is only about 60 pages in 7 short chapters, and it's designed to give you a foundational comprehension so that you can refer to it when you are live in the simulation and you are forced to use this wisdom. You got to have some sort of foundational gnosis or knowledge of the Father to come to the Father in the knowledge of the Father. We're not dealing with childlike faith anymore, although that's not bad. The gnosis of the Father and the addition of the faith is the true perfect maturity in Christ. You have to come to maturity in your spiritual walk. That means you have to know the Father. Remember, the whole purpose of this school, and it says it in the Gospel of Truth and the Nag Hammadi Library, is to come to know, love, and trust the Father. To come to know, love, and trust the Father, period. You have to know the Father through the gnosis, the knowledge of, direct experience. It means you have to actually perform under contract. You have to walk by faith and not human sight. You have to step into the knowledge and use it. To love the Father, well, the only way that you can love is to be free. People who are unfree cannot love because they're not created in the image and likeness of the Father, because the Father is free. See, that first principle destroys everything else. And to trust the Father means that you are of one mind. A trust is a contract. It's a performance agreement. If I do this, the Father does this. I am in a trust with the Father. Because I walk serving the one mind, that means I am governed by only one mind. God's man is only governed by God, by the way. There is no other governance. That's how you undo this whole dream of the false governance narrative that is absolute tyrannical. You understand that God's man is only governed by God. And you understand that in your personal mind, and you hold to it steadfast, just like Lona held to it when she had everybody around her telling her she was going to die of a fatal scorpion bite. She held to the root in the false appearance of ignorance. And the root is the strength that the right hand of the Father, which is divine love, preserves man's life or manifest idea. And that one man, again, it's one man, is the likeness of the Father. And so therefore God was not defeated. God is not governed by tyranny. God is not affected by tyranny. There's not a single element of tyranny anywhere in the mind of God, nor was there any man ever created capable of carrying out any activity or law in such capacity in the mind of God, and all exists in the mind of God, and God declared it was good. And I think I'll hold steadfast to that, because God's man is only governed by God. See, I know the root. Now, when the appearance starts to act up, you see, what it talks about in the Nag Hammadi library is that the outer deficiencies, they must be devoured and consumed as matter within oneself. We consume matter within ourselves. We are the light. We let there be light by bringing the bread of life, the truth, to the deficiency. And by bringing that law of God, we bring about perfection in the outer. And in the I Am discourses of Saint Germain, which I also highly recommend, it says, be, see, and feel perfection. That's your purpose. And so when the ignorant, erring, superstitious material matrix of dreaming see, these are the human mortal's approval seeking at every turn. You can always understand a human willpower because it's always seeking for approval, safety, or control every time. That was an egregious act of approval seeking. Look at me, look at me. Take off 50 miles an hour in a 25, and it's so loud you have to wake up the whole neighborhood. That is a human ego. And you see, when you give human egos ultimate power and dominion over the material construct, you know what they do? They destroy each other and then themselves.
Happy Independence Day.
Hey, you too. Every day is Independence Day.
Correct.
He knows. He said that's correct. Hey. So, when the outer acts up, and let's say another video pops up, oh no, they're going to do this time. Then I start clicking, see, or snapping. This is the cue to come back to the root and to know only that which is pure. Hey.
Hi.
God's man is only governed by God. God's man is only governed by God. God's man is only governed by God. Now remember how Lona played out the story. And if you don't watch the story, you should watch the story so you can cross-reference it with what I'm saying and see the mechanics of it. People came when she was holding to this truth, okay, that there's not a single element of error in the mind of, in the spiritual idea. And they just keep coming at her. Well, we need to get you some oxygen. Well, we need to get you off the plane. We need to get you to a hospital. We need to do this. We need to do that. She just kept holding to the truth. And the very next day, she was in class teaching, and she had had a complete healing. So what I'm suggesting to you is that the PTT is your ultimate weapon against human ignorance by removing you from the sorcery, by destroying it at its foundation, undoing it. It's the most simplest of all things. Just like undoing all corporations and holding everybody personally liable in their private capacity would pretty much do the trick. But see, it's not about the outer, it's about the inner. Once we undo the capacity of sorcery to reach you, through human thought awareness, and we peg ourselves to spiritual awareness of divine principle idea, and we hold steadfast to it by holding peace in our heart, that we let God fight our battles, Exodus 14:14. And then you are being, seeing, and feeling perfection. That is the fulfillment of the law. And once you are in the fulfillment of the law, the spiritual law sets you free from the law of sin and death. Therefore, the sinner has been reformed. Wisdom will create you anew in each moment, and as you are, so is your world. Selah.